Here's how Spider-Man No Way Home sets up Miles Morales for the MCU. While Spider-Man No Way Home is busy shattering box office records and reminding people why Willem Dafoe is one of our greatest living actors in human history, many of us are still reeling from the reality-warping implications of that film. We've already dissected the film's ending, post-credit scenes, and Easter eggs, along with some other deeper dives for you over on Nerdist.com, but today we're going to look to the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe based on some clues that we spotted in Spider-Man No Way Home, namely clues that point towards the impending arrival of Miles Morales in live action. Now, if you want to read all about it, Rosie Knight has you covered over on Nerdist.com, but to talk about this stuff, we kinda need to spoil what happens in Spider-Man No Way Home. So if you haven't seen Spider-Man No Way Home yet and don't want to be spoiled, leave now before it's too late.
Miles, let's go.
Alright, let's get into it, shall we? Now, despite the fact that Spider-Man No Way Home blessed us with a pack of Peter Parkers in the form of Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire, Into the Spider-Verse proved that you can never have too many Spider-Mans, or Spider-Hams.
I just washed my hands, that's why they're wet.
While Miles Morales sadly does not appear in Spider-Man No Way Home, he is alluded to both directly by Jamie Foxx's Electro and indirectly by the end of the film. The first mention comes when Electro tells Peter that he thought Spider-Man was going to be black, because he helps poor people and he's from Queens. He also says there's gotta be a black Spider-Man out there somewhere. As many Marvel fans know, there is a black and Puerto Rican Spider-Man out there somewhere. Created in 2011 by Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli, Miles first appeared in Ultimate Fallout No. 4 and has been a fan favorite ever since thanks to films like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Insomniac's Spider-Man games to boot. And there's also a Miles Morales in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Spidey gets help from Aaron Davis, played by Donald Glover. Better known to comics fans as the Prowler, Davis is a weapons dealer who wants to help Spider-Man disrupt Adrian Toomes' activities because he has a nephew that lives in the neighborhood and wants that Chitauri tech off the streets. And although they don't mention this in the theatrical cut of Homecoming, a deleted scene confirms what many comics readers knew, that Aaron Davis' nephew is in fact named Miles.
Yeah, sorry, Miles, I'm not gonna make it.
The implication is that somewhere out there, Miles Morales is alive and well, ready to step into the role of Spider-Man if and when he gets bitten by a radioactive spider. So if Miles is just out there living his life and Tom Holland's Peter Parker is alive and well, how and why would Miles become Spider-Man as well? Well, the answers could lie in a comic series called The Death of Spider-Man, which I know sounds extreme. Although Peter Parker is alive and well in the MCU, for all intents and purposes, he's dead to the world. Doctor Strange's spell made it so that everybody forgot he existed. In the massive comics crossover event The Death of Spider-Man, Peter Parker dies during a battle with Green Goblin and the Sinister Six. After taking a bullet meant for Captain America, Spidey launches into a violent attack on Green Goblin. One thing leads to another, a truck explodes and it kills both Peter and Norman Osborn in the process. Peter winds up saving his Aunt May's life at the cost of his own, which is the opposite of what happens in No Way Home, but we'll get to that in just a minute. What happens to Peter in that storyline has a profound effect on Miles, as we come to see. We learn in Ultimate Comics Spider-Man that Miles gets his powers after his uncle Aaron breaks into Oscorp and accidentally brings home a radioactive spider in his bag, which in turn bites Miles. We also learn that Miles actually saw Peter die during his battle with the Green Goblin, and that helped give him the tragic push that all Spider-Mans evidently need to reach their true potential. With the help of people like Aunt May and other figures from Peter's life, as well as Miles' own life, he becomes a hero worthy of the Spider-Man mantle. Of course, as comic fans know, no one in comics ever stays dead except for Uncle Ben, and despite dying in Death of Spider-Man, rumors of Peter Parker's demise were greatly exaggerated. Peter's spider serum wound up saving his life and granted him a little bit of immortality as a treat. Miles was the first person to realize that Peter was actually alive, which kicked off a mentorship relationship between these two. It's kind of like what we saw in Into the Spider-Verse, but with less sobbing in bathtubs and bagels per capita. However, the fact remains that while Peter is alive and well and Spider-Man still exists, Peter himself is an unknown quantity. The Avengers aren't going to be calling him up anytime soon. I mean, the Avengers don't really have an active roster at the moment, which is another problem entirely. And that leaves a space in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for another friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Although Oscorp doesn't exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if Peter, say, winds up getting into Empire State University or working at Horizon Labs, he might find himself in close proximity to irradiated animals once more if he enters into an advanced science program. Regardless of how Miles winds up getting his spider powers, he could eventually wind up crossing paths with Peter in a number of different ways. The most obvious one would be in costume as Spider-Man, because Peter is still swinging around New York City. Much like Tony Stark served as a mentor to Peter Parker, Peter could be the best person to help Miles navigate what it means when you can do whatever a spider can. And as No Way Home proved, the MCU is absolutely big enough for more than one Spider-Man. Besides, between Hawkeye introducing Kate Bishop and other Young Avengers characters like Speed and Wiccan in WandaVision, Patriot and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Stature in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, there's definitely going to be an influx of younger heroes arriving in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that's all to say nothing of Riri Williams in Ironheart, Kamala Khan in Ms. Marvel, and America Chavez in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness as well. So although Peter's been erased from the world's memory, this current state of existence allows him to reappear at an impactful time without having to be brought back from the dead. Besides, they already did that once in Avengers Endgame, and I can't watch that sweet boy die again. Rather, Peter could wind up meeting Miles by working as a teacher, or maybe they could meet up through Aunt May's legacy. Because although Aunt May died in No Way Home, Miles has been known to volunteer at feast centers from time to time, so maybe they could meet there. Maybe Peter will even have another graveside encounter like the one he shared with Happy Hogan at the end of No Way Home. Hopefully though, unlike Aunt May and Tony Stark, Peter doesn't need to actually die to make a lasting impact on Miles. Now, regardless of how it happens, the bigger question is when would this happen? And unfortunately, it seems like it's going to be quite some time. Because not only does Tom Holland probably want to kick back and relax for a little bit, the storyline needs some time to breathe before we rush Peter Parker back into the suit. Having a slightly older Peter reemerge in the MCU as a mentor to Miles as an up-and-coming Spider-Man will be much more impactful if it's actually been a minute since we last saw Peter Parker thwipping around New York City. In the meantime, though, we'll have plenty of opportunities to see Miles Morales and Peter Parker in the near future. Miles will return in the forthcoming Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1, and both characters will have their hands full with the likes of Venom in Insomniac's highly anticipated Spider-Man 2 game. We'll be waiting though with bated breath for even more clues in future MCU and Sony Spider-Man universe entries. But in the meantime, we're just excited that No Way Home laid enough of a groundwork that all of this feels possible in the next phase or two of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. For now though, tell us, what do you think of this? When do you think Miles Morales will join the MCU? And what other Spider-Man variants do you want to see join the MCU? Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.